The road construction contract template, many times the road construction will be part of the timber harvest contract, and so I think it's just kind of important that the points that are made here to make sure that those are in your timber harvest contract so that the landowner will have reasonable control over the road. The reasons why a contract is good is a lot of it has to do with setting what the expectations are. The biggest thing that gets people in trouble is the road builder or logger having one vision of where the road's going to go or how the road's going to look, and then have the landowner have a completely different one. And also, the contract will define the obligations. Who has to get certain permits, who has legal liability if a fire gets started. Those kind of issues are important to have in the contract. The packets that Darren has made available have a contract template in them, and so I'm going to burn through this fairly quickly. If a person has the interest in it, they can look at the contract template and kind of see some of the features that are in there. If you have no interest, that's really simple. Don't read it. The first part of the contract, the obvious part, who's entering into the contract. That would be the name of the landowner and the name of the contractor. And the recitals define why you have a contract. The landowner desires to have a road built, and the contractor desires to build it. The legal description of the project, which would be section, range, township. It's nice to include a map. This was for a reconstruction project. Basically shows road segments, defines which ones are reconstruction, which ones are new construction. And in this case, there were some segments that were being abandoned, and those are specified to be ripped and seeded. So those are just a project map gives you a basic overview and then defines what treatments are going to be done at what particular locations. The agreement part, it's always nice to say something that the contractor will not break the law. Define the contract period, when the guy's supposed to start, when they're supposed to be done. It's pretty easy to get an agreement with someone and have them not show up and put you off. So it's always nice to specify an actual starting date and put in the contract that the landowner will own the improvements when the contract is completed. Put in a payment schedule, a process, so the contractor knows when he's going to be paid, what he has to perform to be paid. Okay, and the conditions. For trust lands, we require a performance bond. That's a pretty good incentive to make sure the project gets done appropriately. And we'll usually set the bond at what we consider the value of the project or the bid price on it. Broad form liability insurance. Very important for the landowner to protect yourself, to make sure that the contractor has $500,000, maybe $1 million or more in loggers' broad form insurance. This covers in case they have a fire and it gets away. It's pretty easy to have $1 million fire from suppression costs and property damage. And if the logger or road builder doesn't have that insurance and there is a fire, of course, first they'll come after the logger, but if the logger doesn't have deep pockets, the landowner is going to be the next person in line. So you've got to protect yourself by having a proof of liability insurance, and then have a 15-day notice of intent to cancel, so that they can't show you their policy and then go ahead and cancel it. That you'll be notified 15 days in advance by the insurance company if they choose to cancel the policy. Stream alteration permits. If the job crosses streams, springs, rivers, and you have to do anything within ordinary high water mark of the streams, you need a permit. I'm going to cover that in another little section here in a few minutes. The problem with these permits is they say they'll have them back to you in 40 days, and we've never gotten one in 40 days. We just assume after 40 days that the project's approved and move forward. If it's going to be a time-sensitive project and the landowner wants to get that permit ahead of time to save time, that's great. If not, they may put the responsibility on the contractor to get the alteration permits. The other thing to put in the contract is that you'll have a starting date and an ending date, but you want to make sure that they don't actually start the project until you give them a go-ahead. They can move their equipment on. You want to make sure you have a pre-work meeting or a walk-through. Go over on the ground with the supervisor or whoever. It may not be the same person you've signed the contract with. He may have a lead person that's on site. You want to have a meeting with them ahead of time before they start to make sure that everybody understands what the expectations are. Within the contract, as an attachment, it's nice to have a diagram, specify the clearing limit. And for a lot of roads, if it's a permanent road, we'll have anywhere between 35 and 40-foot clearing limit. Specify if this is a permanent road, you're going to want left in. You want to require grubbing, have them remove all the organics so that things don't rot and you end up with holes in your road. You want the stumps removed. Otherwise, sometimes you've seen the roads before probably where after traffic, a little bit of moisture, all of a sudden you start seeing stumps coming up through. You want to avoid that on your permanent roads. And the covenants, slash disposal is a big one. How you want the roads built, how do you want the slash treated? Do you want the slash piled and burned? If so, you want to specify that it's piled in a manner that you can burn it safely without scorching trees. If you don't have it piled, you may want to have it scattered. You can specify that in the contract. Specifying what you want for pioneering. Basically, you want to limit it to the clearing limits so they aren't tearing up ground any further out than they need to go. And specify you want the drainage kept open if they're crossing streams. If they have temporary structures in place that they can pass water if you get a storm. Basically to keep the road operational as they're constructing it. And then excavation, if you have over excavation, places where you're cutting and you have to haul dirt, you want to make sure that it goes to, that they deposit it, store it in a stable location so it doesn't enter a stream or end up sliding down the mountain. Specify, in this case, the diagram shows an outslope road, what the specs are. On this, the cut slope, it shows a 1-to-1, which is fairly common. 1.5 to 1 is also fairly common. Fill slope, 1.5 to 1, generally will provide a stable slope. Specify your subgrade width. In this particular contract, specified maximum favorable grade and adverse grades. And then talking about basically maintaining and preserving the drainage, what you want in there, whether it's culverts, rolling dips, or drive-through water bars. This particular contract actually had a bridge in it, a flat car bridge. So it's nice to have a plan view and a cross-sectional view with enough information that they can place it. How deep you want the footings, that depends on what the frost depth is in your particular area. You're going to use riprap, you're going to cap it with concrete, you're going to use rebar. Specify those things. Who's responsible for the purchase of the bridge? If you want a gate put up as part of the project, specify the gate. Seasonal work limits. It may be important to you if your property is a place that you have a lot of elk or something on, and the elk calving is important, or your property is important to elk calving. You may want to place a seasonal limit there. It's good to talk with the wildlife folks, and they can tell you if you're not sure if your project would impact them, and you may just put a restriction that they can't be in there for a month or whatever during the calving seasons. Adverse weather, put in there that if the soils get saturated, you don't want them in there. You can't build good roads when the soils are saturated, so I'd definitely put that in, or also during spring breakup. Fire season restrictions, basically that would be on your burning. Have them burn in the winter, probably after the first snow, or however you want to put the restriction in there. So if you have snow on the adjacent trees, it can help them, give them a little bit of buffer, a little bit of moisture when the fire is burning. Restrictions from entering riparian areas, putting in, you may specify a certain distance you want to keep them out of your streams. You may require them to flag it. You may flag it yourself, and you may designate crossings so that they may have to cross it to haul timber, and so you want to just specify and designate the crossings so they aren't crossing in a number of places. Road maintenance, basically you just want to state in there that they'll maintain the road as they're building it and keep it possible that if things were extreme enough that forestry and fire or some other jurisdiction could restrict your activities. And you want the contractor to be responsible to know that. So you want them to be in contact with the fire warden or whoever would be controlling them. One thing that I think is important, that whether you put it in your contract or not, when you have your pre-work, is that you make the contractor have a fire plan and a medical evacuation plan, that he know his latitude and longitude or his UTM coordinates. If not, at least the legal description, have that in their crew vehicle, and have them know where, if they don't have a cell phone signal from this particular property, where the closest place they can drive to get a signal. So if they have a fire, medical emergency, they can get up there and make contact with the proper people and be able to give them directions and get the equipment or helicopter or whatever into their property. And then fire prevention, basically stating that they need to do everything in their power to not cause a fire, and if they start one, do everything in their power to put it out. And slash burning, specifying who has the responsibility to burn it. The landowner may choose to do that, but more often than not, they'll leave it with the contractor and basically specify under what conditions they can burn and when you want it burned by. You may want to season the piles a year before they burn them. If this is part of a forest practice, hopefully there's right-of-way timber. If the road contract is separate, then you have to say who owns the wood, who has a title. It may stay with the seller. You may give an option to purchase if the person building the road also handles timber. And then exclusions, you may want the firewood for yourself. The handling of timber, as Lou had mentioned, some operators don't mind going in and just pushing trees over and then dealing with them later. Many times you get a lot of breakage, you get a lot of residual stem damage for adjacent timber. I, like Lou, in fact, the SITLA contracts require that the wood be cut and skidded before the roads are built. And so you should specify how you want that handled so you don't get a lot of broken timber and a lot of damage. Site supervision, this one's a big one actually. You can get a lot of promises about whoever you've made your contract with being there all the time to supervise it, but it doesn't always happen that way. You'll go out and find people that really don't have that much skill or knowledge out there performing tasks, and will make you a little nervous. So it's good to require that they have a designated supervisor that's approved by you, the landowner, on site at all times. And at the end of the contract, any timber that's not removed, even if you had sold the timber as part of the job, that the title reverts back to the landowner if they haven't removed it by the time the contract does expire. And then a damage penalty, if they're outside what you've specified is their clearing limits. If they damage trees outside that, you're free to put in whatever you think is a reasonable penalty for damaging trees, whether to the point where they have to be cut down or just to the fact that you've scarred them. Payment terms, whether the contractor is going to bill you. You may, if it's a short job, you may not pay anything until he's done. You may pay on a percentage of completion, or you may break it down into segments. And as the segments are completed, the contractor can bill you, and you'll pay, within a 2-week period or whatever you specify in the contract. Extensions, you should put in the contract under what conditions you would extend the contract. Maybe if there's a weather delay, a really wet summer and they couldn't operate, or if you as the landowner for some reason decide you wanted to delay the project, you should put the terms in there under what circumstances the extension would be granted. And assignments, if the person you have contract with decides that he wants to sub it out to somebody, obviously the landowner needs to have approval over that. And it has to be in agreement in writing by the landowner that the contract could be assigned to another party. Other termination, if any of the above things aren't met to the satisfaction of the contract, that you have the right to terminate the contract and kick the person off. Suit, it's usually best that you say if a suit's brought that it'll be handled in a Utah court so you don't end up going to some other state to fight a suit. Once again, they require that they comply with the law. Antiquities, if anything's found, any treasure troves on your property, that they belong to you, and that if they're found, they will notify you of it. And the other thing would be obviously that you have the right to inspect the project at any time. And most people don't like to see a bunch of oil buckets or baggies or trash around their property, so it's good to put in there that you won't tolerate any waste on your property. they need to keep up on it. And notice this deals with the fact that if you're unhappy with how the contract's going and getting to the point where you may choose to terminate it, that you will give written notice to the contractor informing them of your intention. Basically, you want them to hold, you as the landowner, you want to be held harmless by the activities of the contractor. You want that clause in your contract. Any modifications, you want them in writing, as agreed to by both sides. Performance, basically there is you want to guarantee the performance through a bond. And if you have someone you're really comfortable with and don't do that, you may choose to not put that in there. It may add, requiring a bond may add to the cost of the project. And put in a clause for attorney's fees so that if there's a suit action and you win, that they pay your attorney's fees. And the end of that would be the notarized signatures. The next segment, this is changing speeds here a little bit, is a lot of properties have old roads on them. They may be old mining roads. They may be old roads went in for spring development for any number of reasons. And many times the landowner has to assess, do I want to improve this road as part of my project, or do I want to start from scratch? If they're no longer serving the needs they were originally constructed for, that's a good reason to kind of pretend that they don't exist, assuming that there's not some environmental problems, and look at the project independent of them. You may end up using segments of it. You may be using none of it. The other thing is if they're too difficult to maintain. They may be built in a stream bottom that's constantly eroding. It may be built on a steep slope where the road's always filling in. Those are things to take into account when determining if you're going to continue to use a road. This is on Trustland's Tabby Block, the McDonald Basin reconstruction project. In this particular case, a road went from the bottom up to the top. And in places, the grade wasn't too bad. But you can see here that this is basically a stream bottom, a valley bottom here. And there's just absolutely no place for the water to go. In this particular case, these slopes are over 20%. So the combination of valley bottom location and the slopes, to me, it was really easy. You're not going to reuse it. They were draws originally, probably with occasional surface flow, but with the compaction from traffic on the road, I'm guessing that it had more surface flow after use as a road than it had before. It was fairly active. Each season when you'd go up it, you could tell the difference. I mean, it was normally snow melt, I think, was probably the main water flow on this particular road. The next aspect of considering whether to abandon a road would be if they're causing unacceptable environmental damage. And everybody's going to have a different definition, and I'm not going to try to define that for anyone. But it's basically a stewardship issue. This is a county road, Red Creek Road. This is a pretty big violation of the Clean Water Act. The county maintenance guys, you can see the stream here, it wants to come in and go this way. And so it's been cutting on this thing for decades, probably longer. And so someone brought a little front end loader up and dug some dirt out and threw it in here and thought that would help. This is a situation where this stream wants to curve, and it's going to curve, or it's going to fight you every inch of the way. This is looking across the stream at the same thing where the dirt was dumped, and you can see that basically clumps of dirt went right down into the water there. And it's a pretty nice fishery. There's actually some surprisingly large fish in there. This is the same road, actually a year later. This is the area that was dumped right here. You can see obviously it's gone. You can see how close the road surface is. It's just right on the edge, and this is almost straight up and down. So this is a case of do you want to continue fighting the stream there, or do you want to move the road? The other thing is, okay, when do you want to use the old road? It's basically the converse of what was talked about before. if an old road's out there and it meets your current needs and you think it's going to meet your future needs, then it's good to use. If the maintenance is reasonable and not causing excessive environmental damage. Since we're looking at the streams, we'll kind of keep changing here. And I didn't know really how to fit these in, so we'll just kind of work through them in a random fashion. I don't know how many are familiar with the stream alteration laws, but basically if you're operating in a stream channel, an active stream channel, you have to get a permit. And I talked about it can be a long process in getting feedback on these. Okay, and we have an example of a form that's been filled out, but basically they're asking for what the activity is going to be, where it's going to be located at, and how it's going to impact the stream, and if you're going to impact the stream channel, how you're going to fix it. This is one that was filled out by one of the Trustlands rangeland specialists for the Red Creek Road. We actually had a cooperative agreement with Duchesne County where we agreed to move with a joint venture with them to move the road up out of the valley bottom for about 2/3 of a mile there and then reclaim the old road. And this is the permit for that. Basically talks about what's going to occur for the project and what the adjacent landowners are that may be impacted by the project. This shows on a topo map the sites where the slopes were going to be. These are the sites along the old road. The new road actually came off this corner here and came out just off the floodplain and then curved back around into here. And 3 of these sites where the road had been undercut by the stream, we proposed to lay back the slopes and revegetate those. This shows them on a photo. Once again, you can see on the photo where the road is really close to the stream here. This shows where the edge of the road was and how it's going to be contoured back, and some willow plantings here to try to restabilize that. We know that the stream is going to take out that road if we leave it alone, and so the best thing to do is excavate a lot of this material out of the way so it doesn't end up in Red Creek Reservoir, which is a few miles down below here, and has actually had quite a bit of sediment fill in that over time already. When you're looking at road locations and whether to rebuild roads or reuse them, the river bottom, valley bottom roads, and there's lots of them. Many of those have a lot of maintenance issues. The further away from the water you get, the less, at least from an environmental impact standpoint, the less problems you have. It's always nice if you can get up on the ridge. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. This is the Red Creek Road. Again, the old road goes along here, and about this area in here is where it was really close to the stream. The bypass road or new section started here and basically came on an even grade around the hillside, and then ties back into this road. The old road you can see actually dropped down and then came back up, and so we actually end up with a better grade, and we got the road far enough away from the stream where we probably won't be contributing too much to the sediment load of the stream. This is from the other end, looking back, and they had just started construction, but you kind of get a feel. There's still a few bumps that have to be taken out of the road, but it contours around pretty evenly to this point here. This whole stretch of road here was ripped and seeded once the project was completed. This shows the little hoe in there removing the excess soil. This was that spot where you'd seen before where it was almost vertical here. So this slope is being laid back. And here's Scott. The timing was just perfect. We were just getting bud burst on the willows, and he cut a bunch of sticks basically out of them to start sticking them in the ground, and most of them actually took hold. As far as road relocation, this was the McDonald Basin I'd shown some slides of earlier, where the steep patches, some of those steep photos, I think I show them again, where the stream was running down the valley bottom. That was through this stretch here. And there was a stretch up in here also that was very steep and also that same kind of a valley bottom location. So we had to locate a road, come around to take the grade out and get out of the valley bottom. Used existing pieces here and here that were in pretty good shape. The grade was okay. They weren't cutting too bad. So we used as much as we could, but if the road if the grades weren't reasonable, or if they were in the valley bottoms, we just went ahead and relocated it. Just another picture of the same segment, basically looking at the segment lengths. This was part of the bid package for the contractor, so they could see how many feet of each thing that they would have to do, and kind of give them a good aid for doing their pricing. Same road. Just once again looking at why we chose to bypass and not use these particular segments.